Let's get into it. We got Joe Rogan, Tulsi Gabbard talking about FISA and talking about the TikTok ban. Tulsi's going to give her perspective on that, and she does it very eloquently. I love what she has to say. Joe and her are also going to talk about FISA. Joe's going to talk about government overreach. And then we're going to springboard the conversation into talking about FISA. We're going to have Tucker talk about what he thinks. The secret police, Jordan Peterson, is going to chime in because he was in front of Congress warning them about the possibility of secret police if they allow all this overreach. Then we're going to have Mike Johnson's perspective on it. Then we're going to have Marjorie Taylor Green's perspective on it. Then we're going to have a little compilation of Trump, and Trump was actually calling to kill it, and then some other things happened, and then we're going to end it off with Tucker just saying beautifully how messed up this whole thing is. And we're going to talk about the TikTok ban as well. Let's get right into it. Don't forget about the new channel I got, Coach COLIN Media. We break away from the Rogan content there. We already got 60 videos up. We're not playing around on that channel. Link in the description. But let me hit you with this question first. Tulsi brings up the Fourth Amendment. She brings it up quite a bit. So I just want to tell you guys what it is in case you didn't know. The Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution protects the right of individuals to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable search and seizures. And then lower here, it says a little bit more. It says it balances government's need to investigate and enforce the law with individuals' rights to privacy and security from government intrusion. Now, let's just read quickly what FISA is. What is FISA? The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act is a United States federal law that regulates the surveillance and collection of foreign intelligence information. It was passed in 1978 and has been amended several times since then. The law allows the government to conduct electronic surveillance, physical searches, and other forms of intelligence gathering for the purpose of gathering foreign intelligence. Okay? Under FISA, the government is authorized to conduct surveillance on individuals and organizations outside the U.S., as well as on individuals and organizations within the U.S. who are believed to be agents of foreign powers or to be engaged in international terrorism. Now, my quick question is, does that not sound like a loophole to what the Fourth Amendment is? That's what it kind of read like to me. It kind of seems like they're trying to pull some kind of loophole thing here. That's just my thinking. You let me know what you guys think in the comments. Now, let's get to the Joe Rogan clip. Let's go, ladies and gentlemen.
What's your opinion on this potential TikTok ban?
I oppose it. I oppose it on the grounds of free speech and civil liberties. This is, speaking of fomenting fear, this is one of those pieces of legislation that's, if you just read the talking points for those who support it, and it's supported by many people in Congress on both sides of the aisle, you think like, oh my gosh, we've got a national security risk and you've got concern for our kids and all of this other stuff. But when you actually read the language and understand the implications of what this legislation does, it's not really about TikTok at all. It's about government being able to choose what platforms are acceptable and what are not, and what we as Americans are able to either get information from or put information out. And then you look at, okay, well, if they're giving themselves that authority, how will it then be enforced? Then you get into the civil liberties concern of the Fourth Amendment of government overreach and trying to figure out, okay, well, now I'm going to have to look into your phone and figure out if you're the guy who's using the VPN to illegally download this app. Then you're looking at, the designation is that if you have 20% or more ownership stake or stake in a business that has been designated by our government to be illegal because of its association with a foreign adversary. There are a few countries listed there, but the president would have the power to designate any other country a foreign adversary without any kind of, Congress wouldn't have to take action. It's a unilateral move. You are also implicated if you are someone who the government determines to be influenced by or connected with one of these countries that is a foreign adversary. And so, Elon Musk has talked about this. It is not outside of the realm of the not only possible, but the probable that if they wanted to say, okay, well, Elon Musk is doing business with this country that we don't like, and he also owns this platform called X should be shut down because of this association. I think Ron Paul said it best when he said that this legislation is the most, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said it's the most egregious violation of civil liberty since the Patriot Act was passed in the wake of 9/11. And when you look at the arguments that are being made around both of those pushes, they are very eerily similar in invoking national security concerns. And the language and the way that's written is intentionally vague, that puts far more power into the hands of the executive branch, just like the Patriot Act did, to single-handedly say, well, this is a good guy and this is a bad guy. And that has a direct implication on Americans.
And wasn't there another recent thing that passed that allows more observation of people through cell phones?
Yes. And both of these things were actually wrapped up into that same bill that just passed through. They lumped together a whole bunch of different things. They were separate previously, but the thing that the TikTok ban was lumped together with was the bill that would reinstate or extend the FISA authorities, the Foreign Intelligence Security Act authorities, for another 2 years. Section 702 of FISA gives our government the authority to surveil foreign actors, essentially, to try to identify terrorist threats. But part of that is they have the ability to capture all of the conversations. If you talk to somebody in another country that they're interested in, they can then go in and capture all of your information as an American citizen. And they can do this without a warrant. This has been in place for quite some time. But this legislation that was just passed recently expanded those authorities so they can go and actually look at like your Wi-Fi history. If you're connected to Wi-Fi, they can look at everything that you did connected to that Wi-Fi signal and in some other ways. It took an already bad problem and made it many, many times worse. And again, they're just saying, well, it's for national security. The problem here is...
That's the thing they always say.
That's the thing they always say. And it's like, I think it was Benjamin Franklin who said, if you are choosing security over liberty, you will neither be secure nor will you have liberty. That's not an actual quote, but that's basically the point here. And that's the false choice that so many of these politicians are forcing on the American people is you can either be less free and more safe, or you can be more free and, oh, by the way, you're going to invite more terrorist attacks or more national security incursions on our country. And it's just BS. It is BS.
It's also very un-American.
It is.
And here's the problem with government overreach. The government is just people.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Like, if you thought of them as something other than a 3-letter name like DEA, CIA, NSA, just a bunch of people, you would go, well, why is this like the DEA? Why is this 10,000 people telling all these other people what to do? That sounds crazy. There's way more of them than there are of us. If it was just in this room and Jamie turns out to be the cop and he says, hey, I'm going to put you two in prison because I heard you like hemp. Yeah. We'd be like, Jimmy, fuck off. That's crazy. But if it's a government agency with a 3-letter name, you're like, oh, this is the government. Right. The government is just human beings. Yeah. And there's just a natural inclination that people in power have is to try to gain more power.
Yes.
Rich people want to get richer. Hot people want to get hotter. Like, that's what it is. It's like everybody wants to improve. Yeah. And the governments, they're in the business of telling you what to do, and they want to be better at that business. Yeah. And the best way is to be able to constantly be able to surveil everything you say and do.
Right. And again, we
shouldn't let them.
No. And this is the problem. This is the problem is that, every elected official swears an oath to support and defend the Constitution. Yet, as we saw with this most recent example, they are so ready to undermine our Fourth Amendment rights in the Constitution in the name of national security. And I know some of them are doing it with good intention, but without actually considering that the challenge and responsibility of those in government and those who have this power is to strike that correct balance between ensuring that our liberties and our constitutional rights are protected. You swear an oath to do this when you take this job, while also ensuring, okay, well, we can do both and we must do both. We can be safe and secure and also be able to live free without worrying about every time you pick up your phone or you make a phone call wondering if the government is surveilling us. And then you add on to that what's happening now where, like January 6th, for example. I was working out in the gym, Marine Corps gym in Hawaii down the street from our house, bumped into a guy who I met It's a long story, but I met him when The Rock's stunt double was getting his traditional Samoan tattoo. And it's a whole ceremony. It was a 7-day thing. And so this other guy is Samoan. We met, became friends. I saw him in the gym, and he's with his 14-year-old son. How's it going? This and that. And he's like, oh, the FBI just came to my house out in Laie, small rural community on the island of Oahu. I was like, what's going on? He's like, yeah, they came and knocked on my door because he said, I took my son to go and witness democracy. So they were part of those thousands of people who were out there on the lawn of the Capitol. And they didn't arrest him. They didn't charge him with anything.
Wow.
But how is it that, years later, they go and find this guy and his family in a rural Mormon community in Laie in Hawaii. They're capturing all of the data of people whose cell phones were pinging within that vicinity.
Yes.
During that period of time, not only on January 6th. And they are continuing to widen that net, looking at flight records and who bought tickets and who booked hotels and all of this stuff. For what? The FBI is going to go and investigate people who showed up there on the lawn on the Capitol. You look at what they're, and this is
scare
my
tactics.
Thing. It is absolutely scare tactics. So we look at the power of the government and how they're now turning on the American people for political reasons. We can see where even the best of intentions with some of these pieces of legislation can lead to the very worst places. What to speak of the fact that we have limited resource and limited people.
Yeah.
What are they not investigating? You talked about the DEA. What about the FBI and all these millions of people who are coming across our border? Are they tracking who they are? No, they're not. Are they tracking where they're going? No.
Of course not. They're giving them money. They're giving them money and plane tickets. Hey, just head on out. Head on out. What are you going to New York? Here's an I love New York hat. That's what they're doing with those people. But to just talk about the Jan 6 stuff right away. Imagine that. And also, I was watching, I didn't save the clip. It was just, random doom scrolling like everybody does. I saw a clip of this woman. She had made a Facebook post about something. So the FBI shows up at her door. These people claim they were the FBI. I don't know that they actually were. They were dressed normally. They came in some pretty big vehicles. Wasn't militarized, wasn't branded or anything, nothing like that. But they rolled up with clipboards and they said they wanted to talk to her about something that she posted. And she was filming the whole thing. And she was really freaked out. And she was like, no, I don't want to talk to you. And she was very a matter of fact about what she was saying and how she wasn't going to talk to them. And then they just kind of left. But like Joe Rogan just said, scare tactic. They just kind of popped up. So whatever she wrote, now it's kind of like for her, and maybe for you as you're hearing this, if I write this, who's going to show up at my door? And I know people who went to the trucker convoy who are fearing the same thing. That exact situation that Tulsi's talking about, I know like 3 other people who did that same thing, took their kids, went there to just see the whole thing, just to be there, because it was an issue of democracy, and it was very peaceful. These guys brought their kids. They're not bad parents, right? And now they're kind of fearful. They're like, what's going to happen? Like, are they going to pop up in a year, 2 years? It's very interesting. So anyway, let's move on. We're going to move on. Well, really quick, just when she talks about the vague language, I knew this was going to happen with this whole bill. It's so hard to read all of it. And when you're going through it, they're going to be extremely vague. And it always ends up being something that is against the people and doesn't actually take care of potential foreign nefarious actors. Doesn't actually do that. They always say that's what it's for, but that's not what it's really. Yeah, and you know what? I'll even take that back. Maybe that is what it's for. But another great purpose it always seems to have is going towards the American people. And it's going to become political. And that's what Tucker Carlson and Jordan Peterson are talking about as I go through these clips. They're likening it to secret police. Tulsi brought up, plane tickets and, who your cell phone was pinging with and where you were, all this stuff. And they don't need a warrant for it. And they can just kind of watch you. And then the question becomes, really, when is it going to just be AI? If they already have this, I don't quote me on it. I feel like it was extended for another 2 years. If they have this in place, Why have people? They could just have AI. When this word pops up, do this. Send a message here, and then that just sends people out. People go, oh, well, we got the message. It means that we go out. Where's the address? AI gives you the address. How do we know it's not going to do that? You can set up an API with ChatGPT to get something like that done easily, especially when you have access to the wildness that FISA has access to. So also, it decides who's good and who's bad. That's going to be a crazy issue. And that's what's happening with TikTok, and that's what's happening with FISA at the same time. With the whole TikTok thing, they decide what platforms are good and bad. With FISA, it decides which people are good and bad. It's very, very interesting. And then something that stood out to me that she said when she was talking about, are you the guy who has a VPN and downloads that app illegally? This doesn't just make it a ban. It makes the app illegal. So if you're somebody who makes money on that and you're in Ohio, it's like you just have to stop. Or you try the VPN route, and the next thing you know, you're continuously doing something illegal. And who's to say that they're not going to, who's to say once they ban it that they're going to stop surveilling it? So now all of a sudden they're just going to be like, oh, this person's an American, this person. And then next thing you know, they're rolling up on you. They don't need a warrant. They don't need to tell you that they're coming. They're showing up. They want to see your phone. They want to know where your VPN is. And the next thing you know, you've committed a crime. Now, she didn't specify how long that's going to be, but I remember when Rogan first started talking about the first TikTok bill that came out, when they were trying to pass that, they said something of 10 to 20 years for using a fake VPN, or sorry, a VPN, just in general. And then also it goes down to X could be next. And I think it's safe to say, you may not be on X, but I can tell you it's wild. There's a lot of information. It's constant. It does not stop. It's Tucker Carlson's on there, someone who they've already spied on. So, and so many other people who have been deplatformed. So people who the system says, hey, these people shouldn't be allowed to make money. They shouldn't be allowed to speak. They shouldn't be allowed to be heard. X is just like, yeah, come on, post your stuff. We'll pay you. So I think X would definitely be next. And then something that really stood out to me that she said, I'm going to move on to that clip right now. But she said they could look at your Wi-Fi. And that really stood out to me because that's exactly what TikTok can do. So isn't that funny that in an effort to preserve national security, they're giving themselves powers that can do exactly what the app that they deemed a threat to national security could do? I didn't realize that, because that's exactly what TikTok can do. TikTok can do that right now. You have TikTok, they can look at your Wi-Fi history. Not only that, they can actually not just look at your Wi-Fi history, look at anybody who's attached to that Wi-Fi. So you got TikTok on your phone, you're on your Wi-Fi, your wife has a computer, she doesn't have TikTok, doesn't matter. They're able to just look at everybody. Your neighbor is accessing your stuff secretly without you knowing, they're looking at his stuff too. And as a matter of fact, if your neighbor does do that, or if you have a friend that comes over, you give them your Wi-Fi password, if they're looking at anything suspect, the next thing you know, you're on the hook for that because it's on your Wi-Fi history. Very, very interesting. Anyway, let's move on. Tucker Carlson talking about this whole thing, and then he moves on to the secret police. Let's go.
A few years ago, we learned conclusively that, in fact, the FBI and the federal intel agencies, the dozen or more federal intel agencies we have for some reason, had been working secretly against Donald Trump's presidential campaign. Trump had whispered about this, then shouted about it, and was roundly denounced as a conspiracy nut, a lunatic. But in the end, he was vindicated. It was true. These agencies spied on Trump, and they leaked some of what they'd learned to the media, which used it against Trump. Then these agencies concocted false stories about Trump. They tried to crush Trump completely in 2016, and then for the entire course of his presidency. Then they did the same thing in 2020 during the presidential election, and they're doing it still. They're trying to put him in prison for the rest of his life. So if you take 3 steps back, what you have here is what we're seeing now. For the third time in 3 consecutive cycles, secretive federal agencies are trying to rig our presidential election. This is what the Democrats refer to as democracy, and they're trying to defend it. But of course, it's the opposite of democracy. It's in fact the end of democracy in any semblance of a constitutional republic we ever had. If you have a secret police force threatening people, spying on them, and working secretly the levers of political power, then you don't have a democracy. You have no control over really anything as a voter. So if there's one thing the Republican Party, the opposition party, should be doing in response to this, right now, it's fighting back against this descent into totalitarianism. They should be working to return freedom and democracy to the country. They should defend the Constitution. They should rein in these agencies, Washington's secret police. But you will not be surprised to learn they've been busy doing just the opposite. So if you're wondering why no one has gone to prison for any of this, now that we know it actually happened, well, the reason is in part a law called FISA, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. It's been around a long time. Teddy Kennedy first proposed it, by the way, back in the mid-1970s. And that law allows the federal government to spy without a warrant on foreigners outside the borders of the country. And the idea is bad people are doing bad things against us. We need to know what they are, and we can't bother to go to a court to get a warrant every time we want to know. But it will never be used against American citizens. Well, of course, now that we know it has been at scale. But that law, FISA, has made it possible. So that law is now up for reauthorization in the House of Representatives. And amazingly, the new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson of Louisiana, has spent the last couple of weeks doing all he can to get that law reauthorized. In other words, to allow the federal agencies to continue to spy upon and punish people who disagree with him. In other words, Mike Johnson's own party, Republicans, Trump voters. Mike Johnson has been working to do that. And that effort failed today because members of Congress heard from their constituents or came to their senses, saw the truth in a dream. Whatever happened, they stopped Mike Johnson from doing that for the moment. So that's a good thing, and you ought to be celebrating it, even if you didn't know it was happening. And a lot of people didn't because it got very little media coverage. But of course, this is a temporary victory, like all bad things, like that chlamydia you got in a hot tub in Cabo in college. It will come back. This attempt to spy on you, an American citizen, without a warrant because you've been politically disobedient. Why will it come back? Because it's what they really care about. And so before it does come back, it's worth just a very quick autopsy on what just happened. What did we just see so we can learn a couple of important lessons? And the first lesson we're going to learn is that a lot of powerful people in the Congress are liars. They lie without shame, in fact, with pride, and they do so at the behest of, or because of blackmail instituted by, the intel agencies. And at the head of that list would be the chairman of the House Intel Committee, Mike Turner of Ohio. We're going to play you a clip from Mike Turner of Ohio saying exactly the opposite of what is true. Here is Mike Turner reassuring you that FISA would never, under the FISA law, the U.S. government would never be allowed to spy on you without a warrant because that's unconstitutional. It's never happened. It never will happen. And if you think otherwise, you're probably one of those UFO-believing nut jobs who want to stop doing ayahuasca. Here's House Intel Committee, pawn of the intel agencies, Mike Turner of Ohio.
We're not surveilling foreigners in the United States. We're not surveilling Americans in the United States. Those individuals who say that this is a warrantless search of Americans' data are just not telling the truth. These are foreigners abroad. They're a select group of individuals who are a national security threat. If you're an American and you're corresponding with ISIS, yes, if we're spying on ISIS, your communications are going to be captured. You would want us to do that. All Americans would want us to try to make certain that we keep ourselves safe from these outside terrorist groups and organizations. We are not spying on Americans. This is not a warrantless surveillance program. This is foreigners who are abroad only.
Every word of that, a lie. And we don't need to guess. And I hate to use that pronoun, but I specifically don't need to guess because that actually happened to me. The NSA broke into my text messages, read them, passed them to news organizations in order to discredit me, and then admitted that they did that, admitted that they spied on me. And they did it under FISA because I was daring to text with a foreigner outside our borders. So Mike Turner knows that. He's the chairman of the Intel Committee. He knows he's lying, but he's doing it anyway because it's that important to preserve that core power. If you have the power to spy on someone and then to leak the information that you gather or manipulate it and then leak it in order to control that person, that's a major power. In fact, that's a bigger power than any voter in this country has. And so he's acting on their behalf when he lies to you. And so it shouldn't surprise you that they want to keep that power. And they want to keep it so badly that over the last week, U.S. government officials did something that may not have precedent in Washington. They lobbied members of Congress directly. They, in the words they used in Washington, they whipped the bill. Officials from the Department of Justice called, among others, Chip Roy of Texas to demand that he vote for FISA reauthorization. Imagine that. DOJ, Department of Justice, the federal law enforcement agency, called Chip Roy and said, you got to do this. Think about that. Is there any group in this country more powerful than the Department of Justice? They can put you in jail, and they've shown a willingness to do that. They could put kiddie porn on your computer. They've probably done that too. And everybody who serves in Congress knows that. And everybody's afraid of them, along with the CIA and NSA and a bunch of other three-letter agencies. Members of Congress are afraid of them because they know the consequences of disobedience. And so for them to call directly a member of Congress, they'd be like the FBI coming to your house on election day and demanding that you vote for their designated candidate. And then having access to the record of who you actually voted for, as they do in the Congress. Can you imagine? You'd be highly motivated to vote for their candidate, wouldn't you? Yes, you would. So they're willing to do anything to get this enshrined in law because it gives them legal cover to subvert democracy, which is their program, of course. And everybody knows it. Mike Johnson knows it, but he's not telling his conference that, his fellow Republicans. In a meeting today with his Republican conference on Capitol Hill, Mike Johnson said, you must vote for this, and you must vote for it because America hangs in the balance.
America always hangs in the balance. Very, very interesting. Now, the first time I went over that, I missed that Chip Roy part. I don't know if that's substantiated, but interesting if that actually did happen. But also not. I would think, I feel like there's so many, especially learning everything about Hollywood. And I don't mean over the past few years. I mean over the past 15, 20 years, just looking at Hollywood and then actually working in it. It's just, I feel like there's so many back room, dark room conversations that we're not privy to. Like way more than you think. Not just like some, not just like a few here and a few there. Like dozens, hundreds, all the time, every month, every day, every level. I really do think that. So wouldn't be surprising. Hey, so many people in the comments are always like, it's not a democracy, it's a constitutional republic. And they're always wondering why no one says that. Tucker said it. There you go. You guys got it. It's amazing. I'm going to do a video on it. It's probably going to be on my other channel because I was listening to this video and this gentleman was breaking down the difference between a constitutional republic and a democracy and what it means for the citizens, what it means for the people. And it was so interesting because anytime I'd see those comments, I'd be like, what do you care, man? I'm like, man, why are you getting all technical? What do you care, man? But after hearing that video, I'm like, oh, that's a very important distinction. That's an extremely important distinction. I did not realize. I'm sorry. I apologize. And then the whole thing of FISA going after Trump. I don't know if you guys remember in 2018, I believe, the whole memo fiasco where this memo was released, what they were doing, what they were looking at. Trump knew it the whole time. Don't know how Trump figured it out. Don't understand how Trump actually knew, but he did. And it's interesting that Trump went through all that, but then stands next to Mike Johnson, who is for FISA, and then says, listen, I looked at it and I said, do what you want. You know, he said, I probably know it better than anybody. He goes, they spied on my campaign. He's like, but do what you guys want. That's what he said to all the Republicans. But then I think either soon after or soon before, he was screaming to kill it. He's like, I want it killed. I want it killed. That's what he said. So don't know what impact he had there, but or lack thereof, but sucks because it's so bad. It's so bad. It really does turn into a secret police type of thing. This is Jordan Peterson talking about this. Now, Jordan Peterson was in front of Congress. They wanted him there. They were talking to him. And in this, he's warning about government surveillance and a future secret police that could spawn if we keep allowing the overreach. And he's not even just talking to the citizens. Nope. He's talking directly to Congress.
Of this relevant to people in the West? Well, because the technology that the Chinese Communist Party employs is an extension of Western technology. Because we already fell prey to the terrible temptation of lockdown employed by that state in the face of
So sorry, I never interrupt, but I had to just give you some context. Right now, he just finished talking about the China and their social credit system, and he was talking about why we should be fearing that here, and it's not just something that's over there, and how that can happen, you know, if given enough time in the U.S.
Hypothetical crisis once and in the very recent past, because we're walking step by step in the same direction, partly because of the hypothetical convenience of universal and automatic recognition of identity, and partly because any problem whatsoever that now confronts us can easily be used to justify the increasing reach of the security and nanny state. It is said that Stone Age people, first confronted with cameras and their resultant photographs by modern anthropologists, objected to having their images captured as they feared the captivity of their souls. It turns out that such fear was prescient. The images that we leave behind while navigating virtual space are such close duplicates of our actual selves that the capture of our essence is at this point all but guaranteed. We all now have our doppelgangers. We all live so much in the virtual world in consequence of our purchasing habits and modes of electronically mediated communication that our very selves have become reducible to a frightening degree to data, the modern equivalent of our footprint, with the same data making up an image of our identity, an identity which can be and is increasingly bought and sold by the invisible corporate brokers that still mostly use it to sell us what we so desperately and carelessly and conveniently want, but that can also be used to track, monitor, and punish everything we do and say. Behavioral scientists facilitate this process with their reprehensible nudging, the practice of pushing people in a given ideologically determined direction by manipulating invisible incentives behind the scene. Corporations track purchasing decisions, developing algorithms that with increasing accuracy track our patterns of attention and action, allowing for the prediction of what might next be most enticing, doing so not only to offer us what we want, but to determine and shape what we need. Governments can and are colluding with these corporate agents to develop a picture not only of our actions, but of our thoughts and words, so that deviation from the desired end can be mapped, rewarded, and punished. The development of a digital identity and currency is nothing more than the likely end consequence of such inclinations, and the combination of both can and will facilitate the development of a surveillance state, the scope of which optimistic pessimists of totalitarianism such as George Orwell could scarcely imagine. The new AI systems, which are so rapidly emerging, do nothing but increase this danger, providing for the possibility of a super surveillance whose scope exceeds anything that mere unaugmented humans could imagine, while also making it certain that even the perceptions that in the real world shape our attitudes, conduct, and personality can be manipulated to the degree that we will not even be able to see a reality outside which that has been constructed by the superstate. The ultimate fascist collusion between gigantic self-interested corporations and paranoid security-obsessed anti-human governments. We're already selling our souls to the superstate for the purposes of immediate gratification, while being enticed to do so by
Mr. Chairman, could the witness be asked to summarize, please?
Do I have my 5 minutes, or do I not?
Yeah.
You've gone over 5
Oh,
minutes.
I'm sorry. I can certainly.
If the witness could summarize, we're always a little lenient with the time. If you could summarize,
I'll take 10 more seconds.
Sure.
With increasing ability to monitor not only the actual attention patterns and behaviors of its citizens, but to predict those that are most likely, the persecution of even potential crime becomes ever more likely. If you have nothing to hide, you will have nothing to fear, will be the slogan commandeered by those most likely to turn to surveillance to protect and control. What was the famous Soviet totalitarian joke attributed to Lavrenti Beria, head of the secret police? Show me the man and I'll show you the crime. Those words were true enough in the time of Stalin's KGB, and the police were secret enough then as well. But that's nothing compared to what we can and likely will produce now. A police so secret that we will not even be able to detect their comprehensive and subtle activity. Monitoring crime so pervasive that everyone under the dictates of the system will have something to hide
Regular
or
order,
much to
Mr.
fear.
Chairman.
If you don't, obviously you wouldn't realize, but Jordan Peterson, when he was like, do I get my 5 minutes or not? He was already at 8 minutes. They're like, what is going on? Honestly, if I was on that, I would have been like, hey, this is Jordan Peterson. Like, quiet down. Quiet down. People pay for this. Like, this guy's going to go down in history. You're just going to be someone who is going to be a part of Congress. Like, people are going to forget you. This is Jordan Peterson. Quiet down. Quiet. Let him talk. But the one thing he said, not just a picture of your actions and your wants, but a picture of your thoughts and words. That's what it'll get to the point to. And it sounds ridiculous, but I've done videos on a gentleman named Noah Ahari. I think his name's Yuval Noah Ahari. He's known as Klaus Schwab's right-hand man. Not sure why. I rarely see them together, but that's what he's known as, part of the WEF. But he has given many speeches talking about algorithms and how it'll get to the point where you're just looking at this screen right now and there will be some kind of camera that's watching you, which some of you I'm sure can actually attest to, you know, those of you that are on your phones. There is a camera and the algorithm will be watching where your eyes go. If they go onto my body or if they wandered at Jordan Peterson, and it will all be collecting this data to create avatars of what it is that you like to see. And he likened that whole algorithm getting to the point where the algorithm can tell in a spectrum how gay you are. I'm being serious. That is what he said. And he said that even if you don't realize it, the algorithm will start showing you ads with more men, because little do you know, you certain things set off when you see men. It's a whole bunch of stuff. But when I know that I've heard that speech many times, and then I hear what Jordan Peterson's saying, and then I hear what Tucker Carlson's saying, and then I know what Tucker Carlson went through, it's not far-fetched. It's not that far-fetched to think that at some point they could get to that type of world, that type of secret police. And the thing about it is, as well, you heard him quoting, he was quoting people who were the heads of secret police. Not in the United States, not in Canada, yes, in Europe, but to think that that could never happen, to think that secret police is just some silly notion, it's like, no, this has happened around the world already. I don't know. It's not that far-fetched. Now, let's move on to Jim Jordan. We're going to have a little bit of Jim Jordan. We're going to play a little bit of Jim Jordan speaking. If you don't know, Jim Jordan is my recommendation for Speaker of the House. I definitely think he should have been Speaker of the House. But just here, this is talking about the TikTok bill. One of the House Intelligence Committee ranking members, Jim Hines D. Khan, voted against the proposal, writing that he believes that there is a way to address the challenges posed by TikTok that is consistent with our commitment to free expression. And there 100% should be. It's interesting because what that gentleman just said, Mike Johnson is actually saying about FISA. He's like, let's not throw out FISA. We can do a bunch of reforms and make it better. But in making it better, they're not going to take away the best part. Like, you think these guys are going to reform it to the point where they lose access to warrantless surveillance of 400 million people? I don't have faith to that extent. I have a lot of faith. I have more than most, but not that much faith. This is Jim Jordan talking about Tucker Carlson and his run-in with the NSA and how they used FISA to spy on him. But this is some direct quotes, because we often hear Tucker talk about it And he talks about it like, he's a person that went through it. But this is them actually talking about what really took place. Listen to this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, in the United States of America, the government should not spy on its citizens, plain and simple. In the limited cases when surveillance on Americans is necessary to prosecute crimes or prevent acts of terror, there should be a very high burden for the government in getting approval to do so. What came out of the Church Committee's investigation into the FBI's rogue actions in the middle of the 20th century provided a roadmap for righting the wrongs of domestic surveillance. An entire apparatus of checks and balances was set up to hold government accountable when it sought to invade the privacy of its citizens. But this process, again, is now in need of reform. The laws and guidelines governing surveillance are opaque, antiquated, and easily skirted. Our system of warrants, subpoenas, national security letters, secret courts, and other tools at the government's disposal must be brought in line with constitutional considerations of basic due process. We've tried to make progress in recent years, but we have much work left to do. For instance, the USA Freedom Act made significant improvements to the Patriot Act to safeguard civil liberties, but many deficiencies remain, like the simple fact that the Obama FBI spied on President Trump's campaign, used a dossier that they knew to be false at the time to be able to surveil the activities of Carter Page. Further improvements, or quite frankly, a complete overhaul of FISA is something this committee should again take up. More recently, Tucker Carlson stated on his show the other night his belief that the NSA was monitoring his communications. While the NSA said in a carefully worded statement, and I would encourage all of you to read that Mr. Carlson was not the target, not a target, they didn't deny that they had reviewed his communications. Additionally, reforms to the Electronic Communications Privacy Act, or ECPA, passed the House in 2 recent Congresses, only to stall in the United States Senate. As most of our colleagues know, ECPA is the cornerstone law governing Americans' privacy with respect to email and other electronic data. The problem is that this law was written in 1986 and did not contemplate, not even close to contemplate, all the facets of our digital age today. The result has been a patchwork system of demands from law enforcement to technology companies in a constitutionally dubious fashion. Courts are split, for instance, on how to interpret parts of ECPA, and this uncertainty allows for data to be swept up by law enforcement agencies without warrants. Another area where we can work together is on protecting the public's right to know. An informed public is critical to a well-functioning democracy. When the Department of Justice prosecutes journalists or implements a gag order so that people cannot speak out about the government's actions, our democratic values are undermined. There are bipartisan bills that would protect journalist sources. This legislation was originally authored by Vice President Pence when he was a member of the House. We should revisit this legislation, and also measures related to gag orders so that the public can be as informed as possible. It should be incredibly rare in the United States that people are not allowed to speak freely about the government's actions. I look forward to today's discussion, and frankly, like the chairman said, I'm optimistic about an opportunity to work with our colleagues on the other side to make some improvement in all these areas.
Man, I like Jim Jordan. I think Jim Jordan was up for Speaker of the House. Mike Johnson got it instead. I do not think that Jim Jordan would have done half of the things that Mike Johnson has done. I do not think that's what would have happened. I don't think he would have I don't think he would have been pushing FISA. First of all, Johnson was pushing it like he was talking about how, again, Tucker's exact quote, he's like, America's in the balance, democracy, safety, all that stuff. And, it goes back to what Tulsi said. It's always the trade-off of, do you want to be safe or do you want to be free? And then you kind of sit back and you go, well, I am safe, so I want to be free. Yeah. And they go, oh, well, is that what you think? I could actually tell you some things, but I can't, but I could. So just know, not as safe as you think. You probably should give up some of that freedom. I'm just saying, someone told me high up, can't mention who. That's how they get you. Every time. In fact, I've said this in videos, that if that becomes the option, because you can always see within the language of something that's going on. If it seems like the option is your freedom or safety, you know something's up right away. You should just take that in. Like, check that out. Check that out throughout time. Not just throughout time, in the years to come. Check it out, because every single time it's always democracy. It's always the fear mongering. And then if you really look at what they're trying to do, and you can actually take a second, maybe actually read a bill, things that, it's hard for people to do that. I definitely don't do that as much as I should. I skim them, sometimes I'll have the wife read them, it's hard. Sometimes there's 600 pages. It's like, give me the gist of it. It's very, very hard. Very, very hard. Sometimes I find people who have read it and get their breakdowns. It's difficult. But if you can actually do that and actually see where does this put me, the citizen, and where does it put them? Does it put me with less power, less freedom? Does it put them with more power? And you'll see the answer is almost always yes. When has it been no? Hit me up in the comments on that one. This is just a quick one. Mike Johnson's stance on the whole thing.
House Speaker Mike Johnson urging House members to reauthorize a bill that permits spying on non-citizens abroad. The current version of the bill allows the FBI to search collected data to see if it includes data from Americans. Conservatives want warrants to be required for collecting American data. It's another strike against Johnson, who could soon face a challenge to his speakership.
Good. That is what's happening. Hopefully that actually takes place. Challenge to his speakerhood. Yeah, he's been fighting really hard for it. Here's a little bit more of him. It's just him reacting to Trump's call to kill the whole thing. And again, I don't get how Trump could even, I guess he has to, because this dude right here, third in line for the presidency, just so you know. If something happens to a VP and a president, this guy right here becomes president. That's terrible. That should be thought about. Listen, if you told me Jim Jordan might end up as president, I'm like, okay, I don't like it because, it takes away some choices that, everybody made. But okay, you tell me this guy becomes president after everything we've seen? This guy right here? Him? Oh, no. Oh, gosh. The Matrix won. The Matrix won if that's the case. All right, let's just listen to this real quick.
Thank you, Speaker. Is House leadership going to be whipping against the judiciary's amendment on warrant requirements for the FISA bill?
No, we don't whip on amendments. We had a conversation in the Republican conference meeting just before this, and there's lots of ideas and thoughts on the amendments, and the body will work its will. But we're really enthusiastic about this this package, because remember, these 56 reforms were reached by a real consensus process. I mean, over many months and many weeks of a special task force working together, countless hours, and you had members of Judiciary Committee, the Intelligence Committee, HIPSI, and you had 3 members who were uninvolved in that before, who came together and agreed upon this long list that made it into the base text. And we'll see what happens with the amendments, but I think that's going to be a very, very important thing.
What's your reaction to former President Trump's comments saying instead of reauthorizing FISA to kill FISA?
Well, I look forward to talking with him about it. I mean, here's the thing about FISA. He's not wrong, of course. They abused FISA. The whole Carter Page investigation, that whole fiasco, was built on a false premise, as we know, the fake Russian dossier and all the other things. But these reforms would actually kill the abuses that allowed President Trump's campaign to be spied on. And they're massive new, for example, criminal and civil penalties for using opposition research or for leaking FISA applications or illegal spying. If an FBI agent or an attorney is involved in something like that, under these reforms and this reform package, they could get 10 years of jail time. 10 years of jail time if they commit those abuses again. I mean, that's real teeth. And there's a number of other reforms and measures.
What does it do for the people? So it protects the people who are already in power, right? And great. I say great. You don't want the President Trump's campaigns to get spied on again, But at the same time, what's it doing for the people? It's still going to affect the people the exact same way. So I don't know what this task force was doing and how much it looks like they were just like, this task force is here to protect the fact that we get to spy on Americans without a warrant. Okay? That's what we're here to do. We're just protecting this part right here. Change whatever you want. This part right here stays. That must have been their job. What else could it have been? We're going to hear Marjorie Taylor Green talking about Mike Johnson, talking about the whole bill. Let's listen.
Congresswoman, where do things stand on the motion to vacate? I went over this yesterday. I sent a letter out to my colleagues yesterday morning. The current discussions in our conference meeting this morning is about FISA, but it's pretty clear and obvious and being whispered among the conference. Mike Johnson does not have the support of the conference. The letter that I sent has been well received, and it was basically speaking the quiet part out loud. He's in there urging members to reauthorize FISA. And I don't think he has the votes for it right now, is what I'm gathering. We're going to be working on this. We do not believe in warrantless spying on the American people, especially when this bill carves out the ability for Congress to be notified when a member of Congress is going to be looked at through the FISA court. That's completely unfair. The same thing should apply for the American people. But Mike Johnson doesn't have the trust of the conference, and that's become very clear.
Are you a no on the rule?
Are you going to vote against the rule today for the FISA bill?
I haven't openly decided to do that. There's a briefing, a classified briefing at 2 o'clock. And then there's also a briefing at 3 o'clock by Judiciary.
The rule vote's at 1:30, though.
Yes, there's still a lot of conversations going on.
Are you considering voting against it?
Of course I'm considering going against it. I don't think it's fair for the FBI to be able to spy on the American people. And what's set up here, the explanation that we've been given, is all of the things laid out and penalties if the FBI were to warrantless spy on the American people, except the same thing, it's like asking the deep state to hold itself accountable. The FBI has abused the American people's trust. The DOJ has abused the American people's trust. So this doesn't give me confidence that it will stop it.
Have you talked to President Trump about your motion to vacate effort?
Yes, I've spoken with President Trump. I don't speak for President Trump. I don't talk about what the private details of our conversation. And as you can see from his post last night about what he thinks about FISA, he always makes his opinions open and clear.
What would it mean for Speaker Johnson if Democrats were to step in and save him if you offered your motion?
Well, I think it would prove me absolutely right that he's the Democrat Speaker of the House, not the Republicans elected Speaker.
Have you just
You know, I like that zinger at the end, but also I don't like the fact that she's like, oh, she doesn't want to talk about whether or not she's going to go against this whole thing. Well, that's a little odd, right? She's usually a very straight up person. And all of a sudden now she's just like, exactly, I just want to be a little quiet. That's very interesting. And then the person asks, are you thinking of going against it? And she goes, of course, I'm considering going against it. I don't think it's fair for the American people to get spied on. So what would make you go the other way? Like, well, is there an argument where it's like, okay, fine. Okay, fine. No. I didn't realize you brought that point up to me. It's fine. You know what? They need to be spied on. I didn't know that last part. See, I thought I heard the whole thing. I'm sorry I didn't hear the whole thing. It's a very interesting little bill that's been going on. I just my biggest not understanding is how Trump is standing next to Mike Johnson as he's trying to fight for something like this, because it affected Trump, and it will affect him again. Definitely. If he wins, forget the campaign. They're going to be spying on his administration constantly. Anyway, let's get into this last clip here, and then we're going to end it off with Tucker driving it home.
We want delays, obviously.
Kill FISA was the order that came from former President Donald Trump from his Truth Social account Wednesday, as a fierce debate in Congress rages on with how to proceed with Section 702.
President Trump used the intel from this program to kill terrorists. And we have to kill the abuses so that we can do both of those things and continue, and that's what this bill does.
Trump charged that FISA was used and abused to spy on his campaign, although it was a different section. 702 of FISA is meant to be used as a tool to collect intel on foreigners overseas, but loopholes allow agencies like the FBI to search the data for info on Americans, a major red flag for privacy advocates.
They wind up collecting literally billions of communications
both from bad actors, but also completely innocent people, including an awful lot of Americans.
There's a lot of data that companies are collecting on gun owners, and the federal government is able to go out and buy. They don't need a warrant to look at that data currently. And that's totally unacceptable.
The debate has paired up some strange bipartisan bedfellows in Congress. Republican hardliners Andy Biggs and Matt Gaetz put out a joint statement with progressive Democrats Jerry Nadler and Pramila Jayapal earlier this year, calling for a vote on requiring warrants to use 702. House Speaker Mike Johnson is trying to assure his members and maybe the former president that the tool is a vital part of national security and that the House can pass reforms to end abuses of power.
It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. I don't get why he's trying to do. Let me just play this last part.
These reforms would actually kill the abuses that allowed President Trump's campaign to be spied on.
So that's what he was saying before. Again, what does it do for the people? And that's the thing with this whole disconnect between, politicians and the people. This guy's sitting back saying, we're going to be fine. We're all going to be fine. It's like, yeah, but you represent the people. What happens to the people? And it's like, forget about them. Forget about them. Am I right? Am I right? What stocks you guys trading on? What stocks you guys trading on? Seriously. Trying to make some money here. Let's end it off with Tucker driving it home. He was on the JRE. Everybody knows that. I especially know that. Let's get into it.
National security mandate, something.
Of course not. Yeah. And there's no justification. I mean, by the way, we had FISA. We've had the FISA, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, since, I think, 1977. So it predates 9/11. Did it stop 9/11? Oh, I don't think it did. Shut the fuck up. You're not protecting us, actually. You open the southern border to anyone who wants to come. You're not checking IDs. You're not doing any kind of biometrics. You're not even screening for COVID. So clearly you don't care about my safety. Stop telling me you do. You don't. You're a criminal. Stop this charade. You don't care about my safety. So using my safety as a pretext for spying on me, it's not going to fly. Because I'm not that stupid. I may be kind of stupid. I'm not that stupid. No, you're doing this for one simple reason, because this is what organizations do. They protect themselves. They exist for their own benefit.
National security mandate.
Protect themselves, exist for their own benefit. I think that summed it up pretty well. Tucker Carlson, man, I can't get over the fact that there are some people, they're mainstream media, of course, but there are some people who think Tucker Carlson is not a journalist. They think Tucker Carlson is not a journalist. They think things like what's going on right now are fine. And there's also a part of people who think, oh, it's crazy. No one was spying on Tucker. And it's like, yes, they were. No one was spying on Trump. Yes. You can Google this. And they're like, you believe Google. You do your own research. Absolutely ridiculous. But I think he hit the nail on the head there. Especially the fact of it's from 1977. It's been going on for a long time, and it hasn't prevented some of the biggest attacks in history, right? So that's kind of interesting too. And then again, he brought up the exact same thing that Tulsi did. I would love to see them in another interview. They're great when they do an interview together, because they're both so knowledgeable. They're both very America first. And they're both just very genuine when they talk about stuff, especially together. A Tucker Tulsi podcast would be amazing. Them just giving their perspectives on everything that's going on in politics. That would be wonderful to see. But he said the same thing as her when it came to, safety or freedom. Stop presenting that to people. It's starting to get old. I'm telling you. I brought up the fact of watch when that happens. It happens so much, and it's all types of people that present it, whether it's mainstream media or it's actual government official. Like, it's constantly being thrown out there. It's for your safety. It's for your safety. These people clearly don't care about your safety, and maybe there's some that do. I don't know. I'm not seeing it. I'm not feeling it, and I know a lot of people who are trudging through this Biden economy aren't feeling it either. So I don't know. Just wanted to bring you guys all of that. We're going up on an hour here. I haven't done one of those in a while, but just wanted to get this whole thing broken down. And other than that, like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'm out.